Hey everybody, this is Pete Saronis, and I am super excited today to lead a discussion with our colleague, Mr. Kevin Hamer, who officially, if I'm not mistaken, Kevin, I don't want to mess this title up, President and CEO of ACIAC Technology. Did I say that right?
Absolutely, Pete. It's great to
Yeah. No, we're here to, this is our ACIAC Emerging Technology IoT Smart Infrastructure Working Group, along with one of our colleagues here on the webcast, Mr. Dan Morgan, who is our executive sponsor. Shout out to Dan, his leadership, in addition to Nancy Delanoche and the wonderful community of ACIAC for making this possible, Justin Herman, Don Lovett. And we're going to spend the next 30 minutes talking about a topic that we think is not only relevant to our working group, but obviously I think is one that everyone can appreciate, which is how technology can support an underserved and unserved community. It's part of our bipartisan infrastructure bill. There's tons of money in the broadband space, 65 billion, if I'm not mistaken, new dollars that'll be introduced into the market. And I'm ready to put on my student persona or wear it because the professor is about to get going. Let me brag about you a little bit, Kevin. We mentioned President and CEO of ACIAC Technology, folks. He's retired federal senior executive who's turned into an entrepreneur, or probably always was one. I can relate to that. His passion for supporting and accelerating an economic future for Indigenous people, not just in Southwest Alaska, but really those that are underserved and unserved. 34 government career. He's co-founded for-profits, nonprofits. He's a brother from another mother. By way of the University of Notre Dame and the University of Virginia, please welcome Kevin. And Kevin, I'm going to pass the baton. And this is a loaded subject. Yes. And we call it, addressing the digital divide, rural tribal broadband. How do we set context for this, pal?
Sure, and thanks for that wonderful introduction, Pete. We find ourselves at a nexus of historic opportunity, a rare time when we have a severe need, generational investment and funding, and emerging technology where they all intersect. It's a very rare time, and this is we're going to make hay while the sun is shining, to use an old phrase. And let me break down a little bit and set the table for the audience here. When we talk about severe need, what are we talking about? With rural tribal communities, they have the lowest rate of access to affordable high-speed internet connectivity at least minimum speeds of 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload. So they are the group of folks in America which have the least access to very minimum speeds, where, Pete, you and I, if we had to live with 25.3, that minimum broadband threshold, we'd pull our hairs out. We'd be screaming all the time. So these tribal communities don't even have that. If you have no access to broadband, that's broadband, by the way, 25.3, no access to broadband, you're unserved. If you have limited access to broadband in tribal communities, you are underserved. So that's the unserved, underserved portion of the program for broadband. What does that mean if you're unserved or underserved? It means you don't have any access to the communication tools and information that the rest of America has. And the severe impact of that was a bright spotlight was put on that in COVID. The tribal communities had the highest rates in America of COVID infection and COVID deaths. And when we did a lot of research in my area where my tribe exists in Southwest Alaska, remote Southwest Alaska, we found that if you didn't have broadband in our area, you were twice as likely to get and die from COVID as any of the 22 areas in Alaska, census areas, that did have broadband. The pattern is compelling. The need is severe, and it's historic. They're on the other side of the digital divide, and they are on the outside looking into the digital economy. So severe need exists in America for rural tribal communities. Historic funding. That's now generational funding with the Invest in America Act, The American Rescue Plan interjected last year $1 billion for tribal broadband connectivity. And so there's an investment, historic funding levels for tribes, rural tribes, to get connected, to start closing that digital divide. Of course, you need both high quality, affordable, stable broadband and power to close the digital divide in Indian country. And then, of course, the emerging technology. That's the piece that really is putting hope and new opportunities for tribes in remote areas that are hundreds of miles away from any fiber or cable internet connectivity. So emerging technologies like low Earth orbit satellite, which is first coming online in Alaska last month, provides new opportunities for tribes to get broadband. And of course, for power, hey, solid state lithium ion technology has been made quantum leaps in the last 3 to 5 years. So power and broadband, providing those to remote tribal communities, here's the time.
Yeah, Kevin, let me for our audience, there's big numbers, people here inside the Beltway, billions of dollars. And again, I think that our working group, I know I could speak for Dan and Justin and Don and the team, that we understand the role that technology has to underpin innovation, transformation, modernization. And we tend to focus on this humanity component, which you're addressing. And so for those listening, if you're selling into government, if you're wondering, the what's in it for me because there's a transaction, look, there's plenty of cash out there, but think about the mission, right? The government, Kevin, we talk about mission and why it matters. The Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program, 980 million. I'm checking out here on Broadband USA, directed to tribal governments to be used for broadband deployment on all tribal lands, as well as for telehealth, distance learning, broadband affordability, and digital inclusion. So Kevin, you've contextualized that. And I think for our listeners, if you are not just looking at this as opportunity, but to sell, but an opportunity to solve problems, this is where, Kevin's mentioned, there's a fact sheet. The Bipartisan Infrastructure Framework was released on July 8th prior to the infrastructure bill. And there's no shortage of articles or links that we will share regarding the story, the humanizing story behind this. So, Kevin, if I can continue this discussion, maybe use some anecdotes of, for example, so people can understand you mentioned low Earth orbit satellites. You've shared with me, what it really likes to be in a geographic area that you've traveled to, where you don't wake up and have this, oh, let me just jump on the internet to find out what's going on in the world. Give us some more anecdotes and stuff we need to be aware of so that our audience can go research this and learn about what maybe they're fortunate to have, but also those that don't, and how we can help.
Sure. So my family's tribe is the Yak Native community in remote Southwest Alaska. That's where I get my passion for this. And of course, that whole area of Southwest Alaska does not have any broadband connectivity. So without that broadband connectivity, that census area, the Bethel census area where our tribe exists, has a 21% COVID positive rate. Our tribe had a 61% COVID positive rate. So as we looked at this and we figured out, all right, they couldn't go home from schools when the schools shut down because of COVID. They couldn't go home and have access to any digital tools, any remote learning, any digital classrooms, things that we in the lower 48 take for granted as a way of at least continuing the education process while the schools were physically closed due to COVID. So our students in Akiak had to go physically to the school every day and pick up a bag of their homework, paper homework, take it home and try and work that homework, that daily work, by themselves with no access to teachers or educational tools. That's just part of it. No telehealth is available. No remote jobs are available where you don't have high-speed internet connectivity. So that whole area of Southwest Alaska, 55,000 square miles, It's the second largest unserved area by broadband in America. And there are 56 tribes, not just ours, 56 tribes in that area that don't have any broadband access.
Kevin, the programs, the money that through grants and other vehicles that is being put out there. Let's talk for a second here about, the technology that excites you about the opportunity. And when I think of personally Alaska, I think, well, frozen, nobody's going to dig lines and dig ditches and drop fiber lines under. I mean, it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy anywhere, but what is some of the technology? You mentioned LEO satellites, but what are some of the things, putting on your visionary hat, where you can see hopefully the future is where we need to get to, but in a crawl, walk, run? What are some of the technologies and some of the realities of, hey, it doesn't happen. It's not a put a satellite in the sky and everything's working. You've talked about how power is so critical and energy to making that communication and that to-be state where internet is available to these individuals.
So not unlike many rural tribes in America, those 56 tribes in Southwest Alaska are like little independent islands in that vast area, 50, larger than the state of New York. They aren't connected by roads. They aren't connected by power grids to each other or any other major source. And there's fiber, closest fiber is hundreds of miles away. A shortened construction season, frozen tundra, delta, it's a nightmare. It's not practically feasible, nor is it economically feasible to put fiber optic lines to all of these remote villages anytime soon. We're talking 10, 20 years by the time finally gets out. So there is that crawl walk you're just talking about. Low Earth orbit satellite just came online in Alaska last month. Our Akiak Native community invested American Rescue Plan funds in a project that we in Akiak Technology completed for them, where we delivered the first broadband in Southwest Alaska to our tribe, 100% of our tribal citizens in Akiak. And we did this through low Earth orbit from OneWeb. They're the only ones that are available right now in Alaska. Starlink is available elsewhere, but not yet in Alaska. So that's the emerging technology. We used our 2.5 gigahertz license that we got from the FCC under their new program called the Rural Tribal Priority Window. We applied for and got a license. So we are fixed wireless access to all homes and buildings in Akiak. It's not just one location, it's all locations in our tribal community. So there are solutions. The emerging technology is there. We in Akiak, unfortunately, are on the bleeding edge of it, but it's becoming more of an option for remote tribes. That emerging technology is driving access opportunities. The problem right now for many tribes is they don't have an Akiak technology. They don't have a trusted partner from industry, nor are they able to navigate through all the federal grant programs to find where the money is, how to get and write a good grant proposal, and get a trusted industry partner to help them solve this problem. So I'm worried that all this generational funding that's now available, it won't meet the need because those partnerships, those trusted partnerships, don't exist. And that's why IACT is so important. It's a trusted space to create those partnerships.
Yeah, I like the focus on partnership, and we know that in this town that you're going to need folks to help implement. You're going to need to coordinate. In this case, I want to talk a minute about FCC and NTIA, that role, right? Each one on the government side, one on commercial, and you mentioned it in passing, this rural tribal priority window. I mean, just determining what spectrum, for those in the audience, spectrum, go check out the radio magnetic spectrum. It is the most critical infrastructure we have. And provisioning it, working with the FCC so that we can have broadband, right? Be it 25 up or 25.3, you still need to do a lot of that engineering, regardless of the physical infrastructure. Can you talk a little bit about the role that the FCC and NTIA, in your mind, through the Department of Commerce, is driving? Because I think they're a hidden in plain view, especially the NTIA, entity that is not always affiliated with like the CIO council, chief technology, coolness of AI and stuff, but they're helping manage how this communication will ultimately work. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Sure. The FCC has always had a prime role in telecommunications in America, obviously. And so in 2020, they came out with a rural tribal priority window where they offered for an educational broadband spectrum, 2.5 gigahertz. They offered that to tribal communities if they met certain criteria, license free. Which is great. But one of the criteria is you had to build out an infrastructure using that 2.5 gigahertz for your community to provide broadband connectivity at certain milestones, build out milestones. So very important for tribes. You get it license free, but you have some hooks in there that require you to build out broadband connectivity for your tribe. So that was a real kicker for us. We now had a vehicle to provide that fixed wireless asset. Important piece of the technical solution here. The second, of course, is low Earth orbit satellite. And the FCC is required to provide approval for the launch of low Earth orbit satellite constellations, right? Each of the satellites of the constellation. So our tribe actually supported Starlink's launch, wrote a letter to the FCC supporting Starlink's launch of their polar satellites. So there's more opportunity in Alaska. OneWeb is one, they're out first, but Starlink also has plans to provide a LEO service in Alaska. The more, the better, as far as we're concerned. So those are the kinds of new emerging technologies that when you bring them together with a long-term fiber optic plan, you can actually create, as we are doing in Southwest Alaska. We've gone from our small tribe where we provided broadband, we just turned it on last month, to a consortium, a nonprofit consortium of 17 tribes in Southwest Alaska. That's that YKD Tribal Broadband Consortium you mentioned. And we're applied for the NTIA grant, Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant, in September, to provide a crawl, walk, run solution that provides broadband in the near term using LEO, while we create an undersea fiber cable to landing stations along the coast, in some of our villages along the coast, and then connect fiber broadband instead of trenching it all across the frozen tundra. Use a point-to-point microwave ring of towers and broadcast fiber broadband to all of our villages and through our fixed wireless access to all of our homes within all these communities. That's transformative.
That it is, and I'm sorry I have to jump in as the architect in my brain. I mean, just this you laying that out, that's amazing. And that's like that hard work behind the scenes before a switch is flipped on, saying, look, now we've connected these communities. I mean, again, folks, the broadband connectivity program we mentioned, please check out and read something that is known as Justice 40. Ann Duncan, the CIO of the Department of Energy, former CIO of the EPA, really stressed that program. And if you don't know what it is, it's tied to Executive Order 14008, which is tackling the climate crisis at home and abroad. Justice 40, which is a program that addresses identifying the disadvantaged communities and benefits that are needed to underserved and unserved populations. So shout out to that program. Kevin, let's go to this amazing group, and I'm going to make sure I say this properly. The Yukon, easy. Kuskokwim Delta Tribal Broadband Consortium. Did I say it right?
You did. It's a mouthful.
All right.
TBC.
All right, my man. Tell us about it, its mission, and what is why the passion for it and its purpose.
So tribes, we have figured out a solution. It's repeatable and extensible from Akiak Native community to all of the 56 tribes in Southwest Alaska, and in fact, to any remote tribal community in America. Quite frankly, Southwest Alaska is one of the hardest places to do broadband. If you could do it there, your solutions can generally work for the rest of the tribal communities in America, remote tribal communities. So as we develop this solution and found the right approach to a village-based broadband connectivity model, that LEO, low Earth orbit satellite. And then we said, okay, how can we get the rest of these unserved tribes, get the same for the rest of the unserved tribes? And that's to create a consortium of tribes. We are stronger together. We are tribal communities, sovereign tribal communities who want to own our internet future. And so together, we applied for the NTIA grant. 17 tribes got together and say, let's do the same thing. That we've got a plan, we've got the technology, we've got the implementers. Let's roll this out to more communities. And I think we're going to go larger than just the 17 tribes. It's along the Yukon River and the Kuskokwim River. So it's exciting time in Southwest Alaska because there's hope, finally.
Yep, I like it. And I know we're getting close to the end, but I do want to have folks who are on and who will watch this at a later date. YKDtribalbroadband.org, if I'm saying that I checked it out. Is that the URL, or are you looking at me like I don't know?
No, I'm looking at it. I can't remember.
Well, good, because I just did it and it worked. So unless my eyes are wrong, good. I was just, not to put you on the spot, brother. Yes, Yellow Kevin D, tribalbroadband.org. Go learn about the consortium if you want to understand, again, the mission and purpose. Folks, that's what we do and hope to do and convey in this working group. We want to teach how smart infrastructure, because a lot of, Kevin, what you've talked about, a low Earth orbit satellite, be it teamed with private LTE to control a community or a village, as you mentioned, laying wires, putting up towers, all of that stuff has to happen and form the foundation before, when somebody goes on in a community in Alaska, Southwest Alaska, say, I am connected. It's not doing the 14.4, modem noise that unfortunately, or fortunately, some of us no longer have to deal with. That's the hard legwork. And I think when this topic was brought up, I hope our group here understands that we can talk about the tech till the cows come home and all the opportunity, but what you've been outlining, the reason there are grants, the reason that the government's saying, let's invest in people like your company to help build this infrastructure. It's amazing. So here's a kind of a question before we hit it kick it to the parting shot. ACIAC's one of many. You've mentioned, there's entities like the FCC, the NTIA. These other companies you have to work with, like, how do they come together? Like, how do you convene, the carriers and the product? Is it hard? Is it easy when you're like, look, this is to serve a population that is underserved? How's that been, that journey?
It's been exciting but difficult, as you can imagine. It's creating the right team, just like in any, as the folks that are watching this, if you're in industry, especially the GovCon industry, that creating the right team to meet the government need is the key to success. Same thing here. It's creating those companies that you can work with, the engineering companies, the infrastructure build companies, that are also passionate about what it is that you're doing, the mission that you're serving. And they are the ones that are highly capable of providing the solution in the environment that you're in our case, Southwest Alaska. It's a very unique environment. So we put together an outstanding team of contractors. We had 9 contractors working together for this NTIA Tribal Broadband Connectivity Grant to deliver this broadband solution and future fiber to our 17 tribes in our consortium. So it's all about the team, and tribal leadership is so key here. Our tribal leadership, starting with our chief, Mike Williams, is progressive. He calls himself the chief troublemaker because he wants to change. He wants progress. Being on the other side of the digital divide is a terrible place to be in today's America. And unless you close that with affordable, high-speed, quality broadband and power, you can't have a smart village, which is our vision for the future. You can't progress and drive economic future for your tribe without it.
Love it. I'm gonna offer up a few bits, bytes, and insights here for our audience. We mentioned the Infrastructure and Investment Jobs Act, also known as the Infrastructure Bill, and there's, if you Google it, $65 billion with broadband. But folks, listen to a couple of these, if I may. One of the objectives under this bill is to ensure every American has access to reliable, high-speed internet. Broadband internet is necessary for Americans to do their jobs, to participate equally in school learning, healthcare, and to stay connected. Yet by one definition, more than 30 million Americans live in areas where there is no broadband infrastructure that provides minimally acceptable speeds. The problem in our rural communities, of which we're talking about our folks in not just rural America, but our tribes. The legislation will also help lower prices for internet service and help close the digital divide so that more Americans can afford internet access. And if anybody on this today can imagine not having their internet, I'm sure they would be having serious anxiety issues. So this is the mission, this is the problem, and this is why, Kevin, I can talk to you for hours, and I will after this. I love your passion and purpose. Leave us with a parting shot. And for all of our guests, I hope that you're taking something away from this.
So if I left anything with the audience, it would be the awareness and the passion to get involved in this really, really important area of America. And that is closing the digital divide for rural tribal communities. They are the hardest to serve, the hardest to get to, and yet the technology exists today. The emerging technology is there, the funding is there, and the need is obviously there. So if you can find a way to participate and get involved in this, please do, because this historic opportunity is happening now.
I love it. I love it. Hey, I hate saying we're out of time, but you know, I want to shout out to you, Kevin, one more time. Dan Morgan, Justin, Don, super excited to have your support. For those on the call or when people watch this, we hope that you are interested in more of the type of programming we're going to provide. I'm going to pass the baton for a minute here over to Mr. Dan to put him on the spot for maybe a shout out to how to join or at least come join. Dan, you want to take the floor for a minute?
Sure. I mean, first I want to say thanks to Kevin. I learned so much about what broadband deployment takes. And certainly we want to make sure that these infrastructure dollars reach every corner of America because we have to connect this country. So thanks for your work and your leadership on this stuff. Be on the lookout in the new year for a new training series on IoT concepts that we'll be putting together through this working group. And you can visit the ACT-IAC web pages in the emerging technology community of interest to learn how to sign up for our listservs and get more information. Always follow Pete on social media. He's always got some really great content and is our great hype man for this working group, and we really appreciate his leadership as well.
Thank you, Dan. Don Lovett, I got to get you on here. If you're able to hop off mute, you're instrumental in making a lot of the programming come together. Do you want to add a few words of wisdom, my friend?
Appreciate it, Pete. Kevin, wonderful presentation. You hit a lot of points, discovery, ideation, some solutions. It was fantastic. So really appreciate having you. We do have an event tomorrow where we're launching our training series. It's going to start at a little different time at noon. So Justin's put together some experts, both from the government. I believe, Dan, you're on tap to speak, and then also from private industry. So look for that on our page. I'll go ahead and put that on the chat window real quick. So before you leave, you might link that page and have a look at what's taking place. Once again, thanks so much, Kevin. Thanks, Pete. Wonderful job putting this together and moderating. Appreciate it.
You bet. You bet. So, hey, listen, I hope folks share this with others. I know it was an early start here on the East Coast, but stay curious, stay engaged, stay informed. Kevin, you're the man, and we'll talk again soon, my friend.
Thanks, Pete.